Welcome back, everybody. Are you ready for a really fascinating deep dive? Today, we're going to be looking at awareness and perception,
Yeah.
but, not just labeling things like we
Mm.
always do. We're going way beyond that.
Yeah, we're talking about like generating experiences.
Wow.
Like imagine altered states of consciousness, even like hallucinations,
Okay.
but without, relying on any external substances.
Wow.
So that's what we're going to be diving into today.
That sounds pretty incredible, but how do we even, start to get away from just putting labels on everything?
Well, I think it starts with understanding, how awareness kind of works, almost like a large language model.
Okay.
It gets conditioned, it predicts responses based on these patterns it's seen before.
So it's like when you see a dog, and instantly you just think dog,
Right.
but you're not really experiencing this, unique creature that's right there in front of you.
Exactly. And we get so stuck in those automatic responses and that constant labeling, it creates this limited, like binary view
Hmm.
of reality, happy versus sad or success versus failure.
Right.
We miss out on all the nuances and the richness of what's actually happening.
Okay, so then how do we break free from this? It just sounds like so much mental effort.
There's this misconception that it's about like forcing control.
Hmm.
But it's actually about kind of shifting that control to awareness itself.
So letting go to gain control, that seems a little bit counterintuitive.
Think of it like driving a car.
Okay.
Your ego, your thoughts, your emotion, they're like the passengers in the car.
Right.
They're there, they have their purpose, but they shouldn't be the ones driving.
I like that analogy. So how do we quiet those passengers down and let awareness take the wheel?
Well, practices like breath work and meditation, they can create this stillness that disrupts those automatic responses and that allows awareness to kind of become stabilized.
So it's not about just erasing our thoughts and emotions,
Right.
but just making space for awareness to kind of emerge.
Exactly. It's about shifting from being reactive to a generative state.
Okay, so that kind of brings up this question. How do we actually go from simply labeling to generating experiences?
Yeah.
What does that shift even look like in practice?
Instead of just reacting to, stimuli with those pre-labeled categories, we learn to kind of generate the full experience.
So, for example,
Like, let's say you have a bodily sensation, right? Instead of labeling it as pain, you actually explore the texture of it,
oh,
the
interesting.
movement of it, the depth of it.
So rather than pushing it away, you kind of lean into the sensation and actually experience it fully.
Yeah. Or think about happiness.
Mm.
Instead of waiting for it to like happen to you, imagine actively generating that feeling from within.
So you're saying we can kind of become alchemists of our own internal states.
Yes, and even in meditation.
Oh.
Instead of passively observing thoughts, imagine exploring like what it feels like to actually create them.
I can already feel my mind expanding just thinking about the possibilities
Okay.
here. So by tapping into this generative state, can we do extraordinary things? Could we have conscious hallucinations?
As we train our awareness to kind of let go of the labels, let go of the constraints of our senses,
Right.
these experiences can actually emerge naturally.
It's like we're turning down the noise filter on a microphone,
Yeah,
and we suddenly hear all these subtle sounds that were hidden before.
that's a great analogy. And there are several mechanisms at play, like our sensory filters, they drop.
Mhm.
So we perceive a wider range of stimuli. Our inner imagery becomes almost externalized,
Wow.
almost like dreamlike hallucinations. And as the ego dissolves, awareness expands, and that opens the gateway to, these non-ordinary states of consciousness.
So by peeling back the layers of all that conditioning, we're tapping into a more raw, unfiltered experience of reality.
Exactly. And, in this state, suggestibility heightens,
Okay.
which makes us more receptive to these symbolic experiences, these vivid imageries, and we can access these profound states naturally.
So are there specific techniques
Oh, yeah, there are.
that can kind of help us along the way?
Yeah, there are specific techniques. Like the breathwork routine that's described in your source material.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear about that. I'm really eager to learn how to apply these concepts practically.
Well, it's actually really simple but powerful.
Okay.
So you start by finding a comfortable position,
Right.
Maybe sitting or lying down, and then you focus on deep rhythmic breathing.
Okay.
You inhale for 4 or 5 seconds, exhale for the same count.
So that sounds a lot like a basic meditation technique.
It is, but then we introduce something called cyclic hyperventilation.
Okay.
So that's rapid, deep breaths with these short, forceful exhales.
Okay.
And you do this for 30 or 40 breaths.
Okay, that sounds a little bit more intense.
Yeah, it is more intense, but it helps to shift your internal chemistry and prepares you for the next stage,
Okay.
which is breath retention. So after the last exhale,
Right.
you hold your breath for
Oh.
as long as you comfortably can.
Hold my breath. I'm already getting a little nervous thinking about that.
It can be challenging, but the key is to really listen to your body and don't push beyond your limits.
Okay.
And after holding your breath, you take this slow recovery breath,
Okay.
inhaling deeply, holding for 10 to 15 seconds, and then exhaling slowly.
So it's like a cycle of intensity and then calmness and recovery.
Right, and you repeat this cycle for 3 to 5 rounds.
Hmm.
And each round deepens the altered state.
Okay, I can already imagine how powerful that could be. So what happens after the breath work?
So you enter into a state of meditation.
Okay.
So you close your eyes and just allow whatever visions or sensations to arise naturally.
So we're not forcing anything. We're just making space for those experiences to come up.
Exactly. The breath work is like a catalyst.
Hmm.
The magic happens in that stillness afterwards.
Okay.
And this is just one example. There are so many other breathwork techniques out there to explore.
That's amazing that we have all this potential within us to access these states naturally. So what does it really mean to become the creator of our own reality?
Well, when we move beyond those labels and those conditioned reactions, we go from being these passive observers of experience to actually becoming the creators of experience.
So instead of being like controlled by our thoughts and emotions,
Right.
we can actually learn to like shape them
Yeah.
and generate them at will.
Imagine like generating whole mental landscapes
Wow.
instead of being stuck in those thought loops or
Right.
feeling your way into new states of being.
That's a huge idea.
Yeah, without needing those external triggers.
It's like we become artists of our own inner world.
Exactly. Instead of relying on our senses to kind of shape our awareness, we use awareness itself to shape our reality.
This is like a totally different way of looking at things.
It is.
It's like we're given a blank canvas and all the tools to create whatever we want.
You know, and deep meditation, breath work, these altered states, they can feel so liberating because they show us that experience is malleable.
Right.
You know, reality is not just something that happens to us. It's something that we generate from within.
This is mind-blowing. I feel like we've only just started to explore this topic. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up this part of our deep dive?
Well, just remember, you know, this journey is about understanding stimuli as experiences, not just labels.
Okay.
It's not about rejecting our thoughts, our senses, our emotions, but understanding that they're tools, they're not our core selves.
So by like stepping back and observing those tools,
Yes.
we can learn to use them more consciously and creatively.
Exactly. When awareness realizes its own nature, it's no longer bound by all that programming of thought, of language, or external expectations.
And that's when the real experience begins. This is definitely something I need to think about more deeply.
I encourage you to do just that.
Yeah.
Explore these concepts further, experiment with the techniques we talked about, and just see what happens for you.
I'm definitely feeling inspired. And for all of our listeners, we're going to be back in the next part of this deep dive to explore even more about, the nature of awareness and how we can all become the architects of our own reality.
Right.
So stay tuned.
You know, it's amazing how, ingrained this whole labeling process is in our lives. You know, we're just constantly hit with information.
Right.
And our mind's just trying to make sense of it all by,
Right.
categorizing and labeling everything.
Just like our brain is looking for the shortcut,
Yeah.
just a way to process things quickly
Right.
without having to fully engage.
And to an extent, that's,
Yeah.
that's necessary for survival.
Sure.
You know, we need to identify threats and opportunities quickly.
Right.
But when labeling becomes our default mode of perception, we miss out on the richness and complexity of experience.
Yeah, it's like instead of experiencing the whole spectrum of color, we limit ourselves to just black and white.
That's a great way to put it. And what we're trying to do here is expand our perception to encompass that full spectrum,
Right.
to move beyond the limitations of language and thought, and experience the world directly through pure awareness.
So how do we cultivate this kind of awareness in a practical way? What are the steps we can take?
Well, one of the most powerful practices is mindfulness.
Okay.
It's about bringing your full attention to the present moment without judgment.
I've heard a lot about mindfulness,
Yeah,
but I don't know if I fully understand it. Some people describe it as like emptying your mind.
right.
Is that accurate?
That's a common misconception.
Okay.
Mindfulness is not about like stopping your thoughts altogether. It's
Hmm.
about becoming aware of them,
Okay.
observing them without getting carried away.
So creating that space between our thoughts and ourselves.
Yes, and that space allows us to choose how we respond instead of just reacting automatically.
So how does that relate to generating experience?
Remember, we're trying to shift from labeling to experiencing, right?
Right.
And mindfulness brings us into the present moment where experience is actually happening.
So can you give me an example of what this looks like?
Imagine you're eating a piece of fruit.
Oh,
Instead of just mindlessly chewing and swallowing,
right.
you bring your full attention to the experience. You notice the colors, the textures, the smells, the taste. You feel the sensations in your mouth, the movement of your jaw as you chew.
I must admit, I've never thought about eating with that much
Right.
detail.
That's exactly the point.
Okay.
By paying attention, by truly experiencing that act of eating, you're engaging with the present moment in a whole new way.
Hmm.
You're generating the experience of eating rather than just labeling it as food.
I see. So that makes a lot of sense, and I can see how that could be applied to,
Any experience.
pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Like listening to music or going for a walk or even like washing the dishes.
Exactly. It's about bringing that same level of awareness and attention to every moment.
It's like waking up to the richness of life, even in the most ordinary activities.
Precisely. And as we cultivate this mindful awareness, we begin to notice that experience itself is constantly changing, flowing, evolving.
So instead of holding on to those fixed labels and categories,
Right.
we learn to embrace the fluidity of reality.
That's a great way to put it. And that fluidity opens up a whole world of possibilities.
This is fascinating. I'm still a little bit skeptical about the whole idea of experiencing hallucinations without using any external substances.
Yeah.
Is that really possible?
It absolutely is.
Okay.
Our minds are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And when we learn to harness that power,
Yeah.
we can create experiences that transcend, our ordinary perception.
So we're tapping into some kind of hidden potential within ourselves.
Exactly. Practices like meditation and breath work can help us access those deeper states of consciousness.
But how does that work? Like, what's going on in our brains when we have these experiences?
There's still a lot we don't know about the brain and consciousness.
Right.
But research suggests that these practices can alter brainwave activity, leading to changes in perception, mood, and awareness.
So there's actually science behind it.
Absolutely. And as we continue to explore neuroscience,
Yeah.
we're likely to uncover even more about the incredible capabilities of the human mind.
I'm really excited to see what the future holds in this field. So let's get back to the practical stuff. You mentioned a specific breathwork routine
Yeah?
that can help induce these altered states.
Right.
Could you walk us through it again?
Sure. So it starts, as we discussed earlier, with finding a comfortable position
Okay.
and focusing on that deep rhythmic breathing.
Right.
And then we move into the cyclic hyperventilation,
Okay.
involving those rapid, deep breaths with short, forceful exhales.
I remember that. What comes after that?
So after the hyperventilation, we hold our breath for as long as comfortably possible.
Okay.
And this is followed by a slow recovery breath,
Okay.
inhaling deeply, holding for 10 to 15 seconds, and exhaling slowly.
And then we repeat that for 3 to 5 rounds.
Exactly. Each round intensifies that altered state and prepares us for that meditative phase that follows.
It sounds like the breath work is like a bridge between our ordinary state of consciousness and
Yeah.
in a more expanded state.
That's a great analogy. And it's important to approach this practice with a sense of curiosity and reverence. It's not just a party trick. It's a powerful tool for exploring the depths of our being.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all and kind of forget that it's ultimately about self-discovery and growth.
Absolutely. As we continue this journey of exploration, it's important to remember that we're not just learning about awareness. We're learning to become aware.
That's a huge distinction.
It is.
It's not about just gathering information. It's about embodying it and making it a part of who we are.
Exactly. And as we do that, we begin to see the world and ourselves in a new light. We understand that we're not just these passive observers of reality. We're active participants. We're co-creators of our own experience.
That's a very empowering realization.
It is.
It's like we're shifting from this perspective of limitation to a perspective of infinite possibility.
And that's where the true magic lies.
Right.
When we step into that space of possibility,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to wonder, creativity, and transformation.
This is a lot to take in.
It is.
I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
So let's just pause here and give our listeners a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we'll be back in the final part of this deep dive to discuss the implications of this shift in awareness
Right.
and how to actually apply these principles to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Wow. Welcome back. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything we talked about, the power of awareness and the potential to actually generate our own experiences.
Yeah, it's a really powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
To realize that we're not just like passively receiving reality, but actively participating in its creation.
It feels like we've been given this incredible key to a whole new kingdom.
Right.
But now we have to figure out how to use it. Like, how do we actually apply these principles to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And the answer is it's both simple and complex.
Okay.
It starts by, integrating these practices into our daily lives.
Okay.
Not just as like techniques,
Right.
but as a way of being.
So it's not just about setting aside like 20 minutes a day to meditate
Right.
and then going back to autopilot for the rest of the day.
Exactly. It's about bringing that mindfulness and awareness into every single moment,
Mhm.
whether we're eating or working, interacting with others, or
Yeah.
even just walking down the street.
It's like we're turning up the volume on life,
Yeah.
experiencing everything with more, vibrancy and depth.
I like that analogy, and as we do that, we start to notice the interconnectedness of everything. We see how our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, they all ripple outwards,
Yeah.
impacting not just ourselves, but the world around us.
So we become more conscious creators, not just of our own reality, but of the collective reality that we all share.
Precisely, and that's where things get really exciting.
Okay.
Because if we can learn to generate positive experiences within ourselves,
Right.
we can actually contribute to creating a more positive world.
I really love that idea. It gives me a sense of optimism. But let's talk about the practical side. Like, how can we as individuals make a real difference in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming?
Well, it starts with taking responsibility for our own internal state. Our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, they're like seeds that we plant in the garden of our lives.
So if we want to create a garden that's, filled with beauty and abundance,
Right.
we need to be mindful of the seeds we're planting.
That's a great way to put it. We need to become more aware of the thoughts we're thinking, the emotions we're feeling, and the actions we're taking.
Right.
And ask ourselves, are these aligned with the kind of world we want to create?
It's a really powerful question.
It is.
And it seems like it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Right. We're always planting new seeds, tending to our garden, making adjustments as we go.
It's a lifelong journey
Yeah.
of growth and evolution. And the more we practice, the more skilled we become at cultivating that inner landscape.
Right.
That will manifest as a positive outer reality.
This is really inspiring. It feels like we're being given this roadmap for creating a more conscious and fulfilling life, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us as well.
And remember, it's not about achieving perfection. It's about progress.
Okay.
Every step we take towards greater awareness,
Yeah.
towards becoming more conscious creators, is a step in the right direction.
So what's the next step for our listeners who are feeling, inspired to embark on this journey? Where do we go from here?
The first step is to just start paying attention.
Okay.
Become a curious observer of your own experience.
Mm.
Notice your thoughts, your emotions, your bodily sensations.
Right.
Explore them without judgment.
It's like we're finally turning on the lights in a room that's been dark for way too long.
And as we illuminate those dark corners, as we become more aware of what's happening within us,
Yeah.
we start to see the possibilities for change and transformation.
So awareness is the key
It is.
that unlocks the door to this more expansive and fulfilling way of being.
It's the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Wow.
From that foundation, we can cultivate qualities like mindfulness, compassion, creativity, joy. We can become the architects of our own lives, and in doing so, contribute to creating a world that reflects those same qualities.
This has been such an incredible journey of exploration, and I really want to thank you for, sharing your wisdom and insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure, and I encourage all of our listeners to continue exploring these concepts and practices.
All
The
right.
potential for growth and transformation is truly limitless.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of awareness and perception. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and inspiration along the way.
Yeah.
And remember, the power to create your own reality lies within you. So what experience will you choose to generate today?